This program is brought to you in part by CIE Tours International. For over 80 years featuring all-inclusive tours and go-as-you-please value vacations throughout Ireland and Britain. CIEtours.com. And by Tourism Ireland, celebrating a special year in Ireland, The Gathering 2013. A year-long countrywide celebration of music, food, culture, and unique events. Ireland.com. And by...
Today you'll find the Irish Americans where the need is greatest, giving time, money, talent, and concern to whomever needs it most, contributing as only the Irish can to the spirit of America. Mutual of America, your retirement company.
Hello and welcome. I'm Patricia O'Reilly and I'm delighted you could join us for another edition of Out of Ireland. Coming up on this week's programme. We travelled back to the early days of transatlantic flying at the Flying Boat Museum in County Limerick. And in music, the Saw Doctors with Petula Clark with their version of Downtown set in Galway. But first, for a roundup of the week's news from Ireland, over to RTE, Ireland's national broadcasting service. The Taoiseach was given an honorary doctorate at Boston College amid protests by anti-abortion groups. Cardinal Sean O'Malley of New England refused to attend the event over what he said was the Taoiseach's support for abortion legislation. Our Washington correspondent Richard Downs reports.
The Taoiseach's cortege came right by the protesters, who were small in number, but certainly sincere in their beliefs. They included priests and activists who believe the Taoiseach is absolutely wrong on abortion.
Enda Kenny has been the #1 promoter of abortion. He campaigned as a pro-life politician, but is now pushing and bullying his pro-abortion legislation through the Irish government, which would legalize abortion in all 9 months of pregnancy in Ireland.
But the protesters went largely unnoticed by most of the more than 20,000 people here, including the thousands who were delighted to be graduating. Did you notice the protesters on your way in?
No, I didn't.
I respect their opinion. Everyone has their opinions. They can protest. You're allowed to do that. But yeah, I'm not going to think about that right now.
Even if Cardinal Sean O'Malley decided to boycott the event, the president of the college, a Jesuit priest, warmly welcomed the Taoiseach, and another Jesuit handed over Enda Kenny's honorary doctorate. The Taoiseach reacted to the small protest and the Cardinal's boycott in a low-key fashion.
As the head of government, I have a duty to stay with the Constitution, which, as I have pointed out on many occasions, belongs to the people. There is no change in the legislation in regard to abortion, which has been on the statute books now since 1861. The situation in our Constitution has been endorsed on 2 occasions by the people, and what the government are doing here is setting out clarity and legal certainty that is intended to save lives, not to end them.
Enda Kenny used his speech to urge the Boston College graduates to think internationally and to tackle the very big issues of the day, including climate change. The Taoiseach's speech was warmly welcomed by the new graduates of Boston College, many of whom hardly noticed the protest that was taking place outside the college grounds. Richard Downs, RTE News, Boston.
The government has denied claims by a US Senate committee that Ireland negotiated a special low rate of corporation tax with computer giant Apple. The committee said the deal allowed Apple to dodge paying billions of dollars in tax in the United States.
Staggering under the weight of $16 trillion of debt, the United States needs more tax revenue and thinks it knows where to find it: in Ireland. A Senate investigation into the legal techniques multinationals use to reduce their US tax bill focused on America's most valuable company, Apple, which has routed more than $100 billion of profit through 2 Irish companies, paying just a fraction of 1% in corporation tax.
Apple's 3 primary Irish entities hold 60% of the company's profits, but claim to be tax residents nowhere in the world.
Because it's not tax resident here or in the US, Apple Operations International filed no tax return and paid no tax on $30 billion of profit over the past 5 years. Another Irish company, Apple Sales International, does make a tax return here, but only for profits on sales in Ireland, leaving it paying $10 million on profits of $22 billion in 2011, a tax rate of 0.05%.
Apple has quietly negotiated with the Irish government an income tax rate of less than 2%, well under the Irish statutory rate of 12%.
That charge of a sweetheart tax deal was strongly denied by the government in Dublin and at an EU presidency event in Brussels.
Ireland does not negotiate special tax rate deals with any company.
Ireland does not, let me repeat, does not do special tax rate deals with companies.
But Apple's boss was less emphatic when asked.
Ireland gave you a 2% rate, which was negotiated for your company, correct?
We went to Ireland in 1980. As a part of recruiting us, the Irish government did give us a tax incentive agreement to enter there.
But nobody asked what these tax incentives were.
Well, the Taoiseach was forced onto the defensive today over Ireland's corporate tax regime when he attended an EU summit in Brussels. Mr. Kenny said Ireland had no special tax deals in place with overseas companies operating here.
While corporate tax rates were not really on the summit agenda, the question was whether Apple's tax affairs in Ireland would be raised by other EU leaders. Mr. Kenny had said he would explain matters if requested. In the event, that wasn't necessary.
So it wasn't an issue that was raised or discussed at all.
So harmony at the meeting where progress was reported on measures to reduce tax evasion in the EU. Less harmony afterwards when Mr. Kenny was asked repeatedly about the US Senate committee hearing. What did he think of Apple executives, including CEO Timothy Cook, who spoke of striking a tax deal with the Irish government?
I disagree with the comment made in the US Senate yesterday. Ireland's tax rate, corporate tax rate, is 12.5%. It has been that way for a very long period. The World Bank sets its effective rate at 11.8%, and that applies across the spectrum. There are no differences in any area or any sector for Ireland. We do not do special deals in regard to that corporate tax rate.
Jim Cook's lied in front of the US Senate?
Well, I said to you that I disagree with his comment, and I'm telling you that Ireland does not do special deals or side deals with any company in regard to our corporate tax rate.
Would Ireland cooperate with US tax authorities regarding Apple?
It would be incorrect of me to say that I could speak about any individual company, because I don't do that.
More tough questioning can be expected. Paul Cunningham, RTE News, Brussels.
Ireland is one of 7 countries taking part in an ambitious project to try to ensure the long-term survival of some of the world's largest trees. Redwood saplings have been transported here from the west coast of America, where they're under threat from climate change.
They might not look much now, but these small saplings are clones of some of the largest redwood trees that have ever lived.
This chap here would be from what's called the Fieldbrook stump, one of the largest trees ever recorded by man. There's a photograph of it showing about 80 people standing on it. It had a diameter of about 37 feet, and it was a massive tree.
Similar to this one on America's west coast. But in their native range, the redwoods are threatened by climate change, which is why saplings have been sent to several countries around the world.
Now, this is a project with lofty ambitions, but there's actually nothing new to the notion of growing redwoods. in Ireland.
We're looking at a redwood planted maybe 300 years ago.
It may be 300 years old, but this redwood in County Clare is still considered a baby.
The small saplings that we were looking at earlier will become, in time, hopefully, giant redwoods. Trees like this potentially have a massive role to play in the future in cleaning up our atmosphere.
So, although these saplings are small in stature now, the people behind this project on both sides of the Atlantic consider their potential to be huge. Philip Bromwell, RTE News, County Clare.
A new website has been launched to tell the story of the events of life here 100 years ago. The Century Ireland project is an online historical newspaper charting events from Home Rule to the Civil War. It's a partnership between Boston College, RTE and the National Cultural Institutions.
A step back in time to a century ago, a time of war and revolution in Ireland, now brought to life online. Through newspaper articles and photographs, we can now revisit the headlines of the day. We can follow the historic stories about the 1913 lockout, about Home Rule, the first telephone connection between Dublin and London, and the not-so-historic stories about a young boy being attacked by an organ grinder's monkey in Dublin.
It's going to result in a huge, I think, upsurge of interest in this period, which is a momentous period in Irish history. And certainly I think it's going to be a great aid as well to schools, and it will encourage more young people now to take up, hopefully, history at Leaving Cert as well.
The newspaper will continue for the next 10 years, charting what was an extraordinary time in our history.
The critical thing about this project is that it captures that kind of great detail of the events of 100 years ago.
Back a century ago, Ireland was a very different place. This website promises to bring life to that past. Sinead Hussey, RTE News at Government Buildings.
More than 500 young men have so far auditioned to become part of what they hope will be the next Westlife or Boyzone. Pop music manager Louis Walsh is currently holding auditions in Dublin in a bid to form a new boy band.
Just the question on the minds of over 200 young men aged between 16 and 25 who auditioned today for pop manager Supremo Louis Walsh.
I'm not looking for the old-fashioned boy band. This is a whole new generation. It's a whole new generation of girls out there looking for the next big thing. My job is to find it and sell it.
I was locked outside in the pouring rain. You can wrap your fingers around my arm. I'm not afraid to chase my dreams, just me and my guitar. Oh, it's what you do to me.
But just what does it take to make it in a boy band?
Good looks and charm. That's us.
The hairstyle's essential. If you don't have the hair, you might as well leave now, because you're not getting anywhere without a good hairstyle.
And of course, a good singing voice.
Backbeat, the word is on the street that the fire in your heart is out. I'm sure you heard it all before, but you never really had a doubt.
Eventually the clock struck 12:30 and the judging began.
Yeah, it came out really good, and I started getting comfortable with the crowd. That's what always happens to me. I get nervous, and then 2 seconds in, like, damn, I'm just on.
It's all right. Like, thought I could do better personally myself, but give it a shot.
Yeah, I'm glad it's over.
Katrina Perry, RTE News.
Finally tonight, a family from County Offaly sent in some footage of an extraordinary development at their farm to RTE Radio 1's Mooney programme. The Lallies from Clara hatched some duck eggs under a hen on their farm. When the ducklings vanished, they blamed the cat, only to discover the ducklings curled up and breastfeeding from the cat.
The news from Ireland was, as usual, brought to you by RTE, Ireland's national broadcasting service. And now we travel back to the early days of transatlantic flying. Between 1939 and 1945, the small village of Foynes in County Limerick was the centre of the aviation world. Today it's home to the Flying Boat Museum, which includes a full-scale replica of a flying boat, the only one of its kind anywhere in the world.
The control room is a fantasy of mechanism where the flight engineer's job is intricate. Spectacular view of Manhattan, though this is no sightseeing trip. It's a shakedown flight in preparation for transatlantic service. Yet that's a sight to see. It's a sky-going house flown by the pilot. His tricky job is landing the monster.
It's the late 1930s and the era of transatlantic air travel has begun. This is the plane that started it all, the famous Boeing 314 flying boat, the first to cross the Atlantic. In 1937, the small village of Foynes in County Limerick became the centre of international attention as the landing place for the first commercial transatlantic flights. For a brief period in the 1930s and 40s, the port of Foynes on the Shannon Estuary was the gateway to Europe and indeed the world.
Flying boats were the means of travel at that time if you had to be an air passenger, and flying boats could only land on water. Foynes would have been a village with a population of about 500 people, but was a commercial port in a small way. So it's true what they say, location, location, location. It was chosen really for, it's on the west coast, obviously. It had a lot of the oil companies based here, so fuel wouldn't be a problem. But more importantly was its sheltered harbour. While the flying boats could land on water, they couldn't land on any old water. It had to be a nice sheltered area for them to come down safely. Lindbergh had been sent here by one trip from Pan American to source different places that they could look at to establish the new airports. And in 1937, the first trial flights came here from Port Washington, Long Island, and they were done by Imperial Airways and Pan American. When Pan American arrived here, De Valera was here to greet them, along with thousands of people who had come from all over the country to see this new phenomenal way of travelling. And Lindbergh was also here to wish them well when they left here to go back to the United States. And you must remember, the small village of 400 people located in a remote area of the west coast of Ireland was suddenly the centre of world attention. In July 1939, Pan American arrived at Foynes with the first ever passengers. Foynes then, from then on, became the central location for all traffic on the North Atlantic between the United States and Europe.
The Boeing 314s, or flying boats as they were better known, played a vital role in the introduction of passenger flights across the Atlantic. Only 12 were ever built, none of which remain in existence. In 2005, the Flying Boat Museum in Foynes wanted to build a cockpit or a small model of the plane. The project soon took on a life of its own, and a full-scale flying boat was built as an addition to the museum.
We were already going to build a cockpit, and then we decided, well, we'll also build a scale model of the plane. And this was quite a big thing to do because there was no existing one to copy, but we were lucky to get the plans from Boeing and all the blueprints, and we were even luckier to come across this amazing man, Bill Fallover, who makes film sets.
He started talking about wanting to do this, a cockpit and a little tiny room, and I just said, no, I said, this is boring. I'll build the whole plane. They went, what? How can you build a whole plane? I said, well, easy. It's just like making a small plane, only bigger.
The replica flying boat was officially launched to great fanfare in July 2006. Now, for the first time since the 1940s, visitors could experience the early days of transatlantic flying. A very different world to air travel today, but strictly limited to the very privileged who could afford it.
Up to now, we had been explaining through photographs and diagrams what it was like, but now visitors to the museum can just step on board the Yankee Clipper and see for themselves what luxury and what an enormous aircraft she was. And at that time, of course, the greatest aircraft in the world. When you step on board the Yankee Clipper, you just walk back into the 1940s immediately. You're into the dining room, which had waiter service with shrimp cocktail and steak for dinner. And anything you wished, it was there for you. Then you have all these beautiful cabins, which converted into beds at night time. So each passenger had their own bed to sleep on. But of course, at the back, you had the honeymoon suite. Now, that honeymoon suite was a more expensive ticket, but in great demand during the war, lots of weddings happening. Then upstairs, you see, it was two-story, and all the crew quarters are upstairs. These flights depended on the weather enormously. However, if everything went right for you, you could leave LaGuardia and land on Foynes 16, 17 hours later with a stop-off in Botwood, Newfoundland. Now, you needed space for that length of a journey. And people complain today, you know, they're 6, 7 hours. OK, they don't have the space today unless they're up the front. But this was all one class of service, all first class, all the way. If you were fortunate enough to fly, you were either travelling on government business or else you paid. And you paid $365 for a return ticket to Foynes. And they tell me that was the average price of a house in the United States at that time. So again, it puts into perspective how expensive it was to travel.
The Foynes Flying Boat Museum was originally opened in 1989. And with its fascinating range of exhibits, it's long been popular with visitors. Now, however, with its expansion and flying boat, it's become one of the Shannon region's must-see attractions.
It has made a huge difference. Our numbers have doubled. I think the people get on board and they're just in awe of the whole thing to see its sheer size. And it's nice to be able to, instead of trying to explain to people by conducting a tour with them of what the luxury was like, it's much better for them to be able to go on board themselves and see it.
Well, it's the only one in the world, apart from our Foynes Flying Boat Museum being twinned with Botwood and the only flying boat museums in the world. This is the only full-size replica of a 314.
One of the most popular visitor attractions in the southeast there, the Flying Boat Museum in Foynes, County Limerick. And now, we finish off for this week with a song that was a huge hit for the Saw Doctors, partnered with Petula Clark, their version of Downtown, this time set in Galway.
When you're alone and life is making you lonely, you can always go downtown. When you've got worries, all the noise and the hurry seems to help, I know. Downtown, just listen to the music of the traffic in the city. Linger on the sidewalk where the neon signs are pretty. How can you lose? The lights are much brighter there. You can forget all your troubles, forget all your cares, so go downtown. Things will be great when you're downtown. No better place for sure. Downtown, everything's waiting for you. Don't hang around and let your problems surround you. There are movie shows downtown. Maybe you know some little places to go So maybe I'll see you there. We can forget all our troubles, forget all our cares, and go downtown. Things will be great when you're downtown. Don't wait a minute.
Go Away Band, the Saw Doctors there with Petula Clark with their version of Downtown. Well, that's it for another week here on Out of Ireland. Don't forget to join us at the same time next week. But for now, from all of us here, I'm Patricia O'Reilly. Take care, and we'll see you soon.
This program is brought to you in part by CIE Tours International. For over 80 years featuring all-inclusive tours and go-as-you-please value vacations throughout Ireland and Britain. CIEtours.com. And by Tourism Ireland, celebrating a special year in Ireland, The Gathering 2013. A year-long countrywide celebration of music, food, culture, and unique events. Ireland.com. And by...
Today you'll find the Irish Americans where the need is greatest, giving time, money, talent, and concern to whomever needs it most, contributing as only the Irish can to the spirit of America. Mutual of America, your retirement company.